Before the first morning, there was a king. He was the ground from which kingship itself grew, and he delegated his authority to a council of stewards, assigning them as governors over the nations of men. These stewards looked at the nations they had been given and mistook the gift for the giver. They accepted the worship of the people. They taught nations to call them ultimate, turning a single kingdom into darkened territories. The king moved to reclaim what was stolen through his own speech, promising that the word would reclaim every territory. This wasn't a military maneuver, it was a strategy of architecture. The global darkness resulted from governors forgetting their accountability, and the king was reintroducing the blueprint of his own mind back into the world. For a time, this nation carried that word openly. They built a temple and lived according to a code that made the surrounding rogue nations take notice. They were a people whose god was the king himself. But they began to envy the spectacle of the rogue gods. They traded the living speech of the king for the mute performances of his enemies, leading to their own conquest and eventually exile in a foreign land. Upon their return, they vowed never to lose the word again. But their devotion turned into a defensive reflex. They began to build walls around the truth, creating systems designed to protect the word by isolating it. These were the keepers. They developed interpretations so dense that no corruption could penetrate, and they guarded the word like a treasure buried in a field, perfectly preserved and almost entirely unshared. The institution meant to carry the truth had become a fortress that imprisoned it. They had perfected the art of guarding the box, but in doing so, they had forgotten the purpose of the contents. When the king sent his son, he did not come to the keepers. He arrived through the poor, entering the nation entrusted with the word from the bottom up. He took the word the keepers had walled up and broke it open like bread. He gave it freely to the people the long robes ignored, the foreign, the unclean, and those the system labeled unworthy. The keepers saw this generosity as destruction. A nation that had survived exile by building thicker walls could not tolerate a man who treated those walls as the primary obstacle. They rejected him and had him removed. Before he departed, the son bypassed the stone and the scrolls. He breathed the word directly into his servants, turning them into living carriers, and told them to take that speech into every rogue-governed nation on earth. This proved the word's true nature. Its power is not found in the security of a vault, but in its ability to take root in the lives of the broken. The first messenger was a former keeper himself, a man once obsessed with the walls. After a light struck him down on an open road, he spent his life scattering the word across the known world. He was shipwrecked and imprisoned, but the word he planted grew in soil the original guardians had never considered, creating a harvest that could not be uprooted. Centuries later, the pattern repeated. The institution built in the son's name had become an empire of its own, with elaborate robes and walls that sold the promise of light for coin. In a small room, a second messenger read the first messenger's words and realized the truth. Trust cannot be purchased, and the word cannot be owned by rank. He drove a stake into the empire's wall. The sound rang across the world, and as cracks spread, the word escaped the box once again. History shows a relentless cycle. Power structures attempt to lock the word in a profitable container, and the king sends someone to shatter it. After centuries of these walls spreading to the far corners of the earth, a third voice rose in a remote archipelago. He read the first messenger and the second, and he saw that the keepers were again holding the word for themselves. He cried out with a specific warning, "The walls of Babylon have fallen. Come out of her." He insisted the word was never meant to be kept, but only carried, because the time for the final harvest was approaching. This third cry is the final alarm. It signals that the timeline for wall building has run out, as the word makes its final transit through the world. The son is returning to reclaim the territories the rogue stewards stole. When he arrives, every servant will be called to show what they have done with what they were given. Those who carried the word into hostile territory and multiplied it will be first. Because they took something small and made it large, the son will place cities beyond counting into their hands. Then the keepers will come, standing before him in their long robes. They will present their records of how well they protected the word. The sun will look at their walls, and then he will systematically strip them of their titles and the symbols of their office. The authority hoarded by keepers is zeroed out, handed to the servant who spent their life multiplying the word. To those who have, more is given. From those who hoarded, even what they held is taken. In the final accounting, those who spent their lives guarding the truth from others are judged by the same standard as those who rebelled. Finally, the rogue stewards and the human enemies who directly rejected the king will hear his final, formal words of judgment. But that accounting has not yet arrived. The third cry is still in the air, and the door remains open, for now. You are standing at the edge of that door. Simply by hearing this, you are now in possession of the word. Centuries of history have led to this moment. The only question left is what you will do with what you have been given. Will you build a wall around it, or will you carry it?